My name is Russel Anderson and I've been a member of Musselburgh Rugby Football Club for 48 years since 1973. Although I did play for the club earlier than that, as a 16-year-old schoolboy when I played for the seconds against Perthshire in 1962. I did continue to play the odd game between 62 and 73 when the club was short of personnel, although predominantly during this period I played soccer. However, in 1973 I saw the light and changed to the rugby code. During my time at Musselburgh, I have been a very lucky person. I've been a player, captain, coach, president, and in 2018 was honoured to be given a life membership by the club. Over the years, there have been many highlights on the playing side, which I remember fondly, but for me the most significant one was one far from the most high profile game that Musselburgh has ever played in. But it was a game which epitomised the change in direction of the club from one in free fall down the leagues to one hungry for success and on the way back up. The game was against Carter Queen's Park and we needed to win the game to win promotion, win the league, and lost again. We had to win to go undefeated and win the league and promotion. We managed a fine victory and in doing so lit the touch paper for our recovery and descent back up the leagues, eventually to Division 1. The dedication of that particular team was also shown by the fact that two of the players should have been in Wales at a teammate's wedding, but chose to play for the club at this important game and were represented in Wales by their wives. Also in that game was a third player who got married the day before and postponed his honeymoon so that he could play in the game. This was the game that set the club on its road to success, and as such was a very important game in the club's history. Off the park, there have also been many highlights, but one in particular during our season in Division 1 shows the esteem in which the club was held by the rugby fraternity. I was attending a function in the Carlton Highland when I was introduced to the then Rugby Union President, Robin Charters from Hoyk. And when he realised I was from Musselburgh, he came across and shook my hand and said, "Since your arrival in Division 1, you have been a breath of fresh air to Scottish rugby, playing a quality game that should be a lesson to all of us. Long may it continue. Thank you very much." For the future of Musselburgh Rugby Football Club, to play at the highest level would be my wish, but yet maintain the community presence it has. Throughout my time at Musselburgh Rugby Club, I have had so many people who have helped me greatly, but I would be loath to single out anyone in particular from the many. For me, being a member of Musselburgh has meant being a part of something worthwhile and good, and has provided me with a plethora of lifetime friendships.
Congratulations to the club on reaching its 100th anniversary, a great achievement. My name is Jamieson and I've been a life member since 2004. My family has been connected with the club for nearly 80 years, with my father Jimmy playing in the 1930s and 40s, culminating in his captaining the club from 1946 to 1948. I myself was also fortunate to play for the first 15 between 1964 and 1977, and upon retirement went on to play an active role in the administration of the club for many years. I was very proud that my son Graham, known as Bob, followed his grandfather and also captained the club between 2002 and 2004. In addition, my two brother-in-laws, Sandy Brown and George Bonthron, both also represent the club at various levels. I'm now the grandfather of 3 grandsons, and hopefully in the future they'll continue this long connection with the club. Inevitably, my introduction to the club was through my father, who was by now committee man along with Bill Hogg to help with the first 15 at Shire Hawk by being ball boy, orange carrier and youngest supporter. This was no easy task, as the changing rooms were located in the grammar school, meaning carrying all the kit over Inverness Church steps and over the river. This was the beginning of the involvement with the club, where I went on to play for 13 years, and with the proudest moment coming when the club went unbeaten in the 5th Division in season 1976-77 and went on to be champions, achieving promotion. This championship winning team was coached by Alec Stewart, who I personally feel had big influence on the players at that time and laid the foundations for future successful years on the pitch. After retiring from playing, I was elected to the General Committee under the chairmanship of Chris Barclay-Smith, who was a big personality in the club and someone I enjoyed serving alongside on the committee. During this time I acted as a touch judge for the first 15, fixture secretary and kit man, and introduced the club shop to the club. I'm proud to say we were involved in providing the club with a lot of the infrastructure that remains today. The club were the first in Scotland to install floodlighting, followed by the building of the clubhouse and then the building of the changing rooms. Each represented big steps forward in the growth and establishment of the club, and I'm extremely proud to have been involved.
Well, good evening everyone. Alec Stewart here. Here we are celebrating our 100th birthday for our club. A great achievement, and especially to have the first playing in the Premier Division at the moment as well. It's, if that's coincidence, well, marvellous. So could I just congratulate everybody that's been involved in piloting the club through to where we are just now. And my own time in the club was from the early 70s, and my memories often come from that time. So if you'll excuse the more recent activities in the club, which have been tremendous over the last 10 years, I'll concentrate in the earlier period. I joined the committee in the early 70s, I say, when I came to stay in Musselburgh at the Stony Hill estate at the time. Ramsay Smith had pointed me the way here. And he also got me involved in the club then. And I started the coaching, you know, in the mid-70s, when we had moved down a couple of divisions into from the 3rd to the 5th division of the Scottish National Leagues, of which there were 6 divisions. And we had a fairly young team. I remember the stalwart we had left from the earlier strong Musselburgh teams, who had mainly been retiring and moving away to other areas. So the start of the new leagues was not a good time for Musselburgh. Rob Brown played on, and he was tremendous help to me as a coach at the time. The rest of the team were pretty inexperienced and young folk actually, and we struggled that first year despite working very, very hard throughout the season, and we just managed to stay in the 5th division. Thereafter we managed to, well, I remember thinking we'd have to do a different type of work and really sort ourselves out a bit more and be a bit more streetwise, because we were playing teams that were quite experienced and some good players in them that had been denied top level rugby up to that stage because of the structure in Scotland, and they were quite keen to show what they could do against teams like Musselburgh, who were considered a big team. Anyway, we managed to win that division, the 5th division, and thereafter we moved up gradually, a couple of years at a time, until we did in the mid-80s reach the 1st division. I wasn't coaching then, of course. I did a few seasons. David Robertson was involved, and Russel Russel Anderson and Robert Miller. Robert was a lad who Gordon McLanachan introduced to the club, and they were very good. They did a great job, and it was unfortunate the club did come down again, but nevertheless we've stayed in that kind of area where we still were an attractive side for people, ambitious players that maybe want to come to us, and that was very, very important. Going back to what went on in the club in those early days, the presidents during my time were Chris Barclay-Smith, Ramsay Smith, George Innes and Duncan McMillan, and then Ian Dewar, if I remember. All good guys, like all the presidents we've have been, but I was more familiar with them because I was working in it at the time. They could all get things done, all in their different way. Some of them were quite keen and hands-on, do things themselves. Others were very good at managing other people and getting to do it, which is fair enough. So a lot happened and a lot of people were involved, far too many to mention here. There was an extra lounge built on the clubhouse, the changing rooms were built, and I think I'm right in saying in that period we renewed the floodlights for the first time as well, changing from filament to tungsten halogen lighting. On the field, we had some big developments. The mini rugby started, a Colts team was started, and we linked up with the school where we assisted them in the coaching and the attending at the games on Saturday, and it worked very, very well, and the school boys did feel they were part of the club. And the last thing I remember at that time was the employment of a bar steward, which was a really big move and quite contentious in the club at the time. Many people didn't want it, but I personally was in favour of it. Duncan was the president at the time, and it did go through. So big changes, and all in all, the team was starting to go better, as I've explained already, and the buzz about the club was just terrific. And as I reflect back on those years, I've got to say that the pleasure I myself gained from being able to help a young team and young players to ease us into a positive slope away from the wee bit of a dip we'd had in our playing fortunes for a couple of seasons. It was great to see them develop, and it was also the fact that many of these players went on to play in the first division from the fifth, and some of them were very, very good. No, I'll not give any names, but one just needs to look through the photos to see the faces that appeared in those teams. And they went on to challenge the best players in Scotland at that time. I mean, some wee thoughts of, just the consequences of a good run when you get that is the importance of your first team. And it surely is obvious to everyone where the present team have had a lift from the activities, I think, going on in the club. There's the facilities being upgraded, and at the end of the day, we do need to make sure the firsts are, going well, because that's what attracts players, to come into the club. If they're ambitious and think, I'll try it at that higher level, we want to be playing at that higher level. It's so important. The rest of the infrastructure, the facilities, the mini rugby, the school rugby, there's loads of facets to it in a community club, but the firsts are key to it. So I've not got much more to say other than, I was made an honorary member, life member of the club a couple of years ago, and I'm very honoured to be in that position because I love this club. Also, I'm very proud of the efforts I've put in myself and with many others to assist the club on their way during the past 50 years or so, and all I can say is keep on the good work, and here's to the next 100 years. Okay, bye.
I've been asked by our president, Drew Johnston, to say a few words of my memories of the club. Our first recollection and memories go back to school days. I went to Musselburgh Grammar School and was the last of the primary section there. Our headmaster was a Mr. Barr, and at assembly on a Friday he used to tell us about Stony Hill and to go up there and watch the rugby. When I went into secondary school, obviously I played up there for the grammar school. The first recollections of Stony Hill were in 1951 when the first 15 started to play up here. I was up for the first match of that era, and the great players at that time were the Taylor and Naylor and Ramsay Smith as a young scrum half and Thomas. They were the prominent three-quarters. The forwards, John Mooney, Jack Aiken, John Downey were all stalwart forwards at that time. My first, shall we say, season was 1956-57, and there was a real buzz about the club then because they had a very strong first 15, and they had won the Kelso Simmons aside in 1955. I think they were the first border club, the first club out with the borders that had won Kelso Simmons. The 56-57 season was a very good season for the first 15. They had gone through the season, I can't recall if they were unbeaten, but they were right up at the top of the unofficial league. We had a very good first 15 at that time, and we went through the season undefeated, playing 18 games, winning 17 and drawing 1 3-3 with Selkirk Youth Club. I played my career through, right from the first right through to the first, mainly in the seconds, the occasional game in the first. But that time in Musselburgh, we began to run 5 15s, so it was a very strong club. By the end of the 1950s, the club was still playing at Shire Hall until 1958, but then Pinkie Grounds opened up and they had the pitches down there. So most of the games for quite a few seasons were played down at Pinkie because it was an international pitch that they had set out down there. So during the early part of the 60s, we were playing most of the matches down at Pinkie. We didn't have a clubhouse then, so in the early days the club had gone to the Ship Inn in Musselburgh for a refreshment after the game. But when we moved to Pinkie, it was Marshall's pub, Pavilion Bar, where we used to meet. We set up, or the committee did, and we all took part in selling an Estes pools to make money for the club with the objective to have a clubhouse. It's hard to believe now at our centenary anniversary how we never had a clubhouse, but these were the days, as I say, where we met in a pub. Through the 60s we had some very good players. Stalwarts were Len Pullman and Rob Brown in the forwards. Ramsay Smith by this time and Thomas were playing down the club in the seconds. They were 30ish, but they put in a lot of effort in bringing on young boys in the club. By the end of the 60s, we had enough money to build the clubhouse with, shall we say, a lot of us putting up, we had to put up, agree that if the club got into debt, that we would be held responsible. I think I signed up for about £3,000 and I was earning about £1,500 a year at that time. But we got the clubhouse started with the help of a lot of volunteers, and we got a contractor to come in and set it up. Prior to that, we had tours in the club, and the tours that we first started were the 1959 tour to play Durham, down at Durham. We played Durham City and Durham University, and that was a very successful weekend. 1961-62 season, we went down to Wales, and we were booked in to the Central Hotel. Little did we know the Central Hotel was a temperance hotel. So we made up for that on the Saturday. Scotland beat Wales for the first time since 1938. And in these days, you could go to the bar in Cardiff Arms Park, so we were rubbing shoulders and having a drink with some of the Scottish team. As the years went on, we developed, by the late 60s, early 70s, a relationship with Majestic Celtic. So, as a club, we toured in Wales for quite a few seasons at that time. The club was officially opened in 1971, although we had started building in 1967. They had a game against Hawick for the opening of the club then, and I think the score was 6-6. I can always recall they played 5 minutes injury time because we were winning 6-3 for Hawick to draw. Through the 70s, we developed the mini rugby and a very good Colts 15 that were undefeated, I'm sure, for about 2 seasons, which had Donny MacDonald and Neil Smith and quite a few the guys that went into the first. Unfortunately, the leagues, well, I say unfortunately for the club, the league started in 1973, and we started in the second division, but went down each year to the 5th division, and then started to go right back up again. And by the time I took over as president in 1981-82, my main objective was to keep us in the team was to keep us in the second division. So we had quite a turbulent time in the 70s, but into the 80s we had some very good rugby again, going from the second division into the first division for a season. The time I had, and it was quite an amusing time, we decided in 1983 to take the mini and the midi rugby on their first tour to France, to Champigny, our twin town, and the age group went from an 8-year-old Grant Talac to a 14-15-year-old Brian Monks. He was the ringleader there. What chance did I have as a manager? I was assisted by Dave Stully and John Talac. It was a very successful tour. The 80s also saw us taking over school rugby for the grammar school, because that had fallen by the wayside as far as the teaching staff were concerned because of the teacher strike. So the club put in a lot of effort into bringing the standard of the school rugby up to date. Looking back, I would say, in my opinion, the two men, as far as the first, shall we say, at least 70 years of the club, were Bill Caird and Ramsay Smith. These were the two stalwarts that, in my opinion, made this club.
My name is Gord McLanachan, and I joined the club in 1965, and I am delighted to be taking part in our centenary celebrations. My first game was against Leith Accies at the old Meadowbank Stadium, I can't remember the score, but the match was memorable for me because I met my long-term best friend, Peter Cassidy, and Bill Hogg, the bagman selector. Bill's contribution to the club over many years was recognised by the dedication of the Bill Hogg room in the clubhouse. After spending some very enjoyable years in the lower teams, I eventually managed a few seasons in the first 15, where I was fortunate to be coached by Ramsay Smith, Todd Thomas and latterly Alec Stewart, all extremely enthusiastic and knowledgeable gentlemen. Unfortunately, their knowledge did not extend to orthopaedics, and I had to retire with a serious knee injury. I did try a comeback in the fourth 15 and was encouraged by Sandy Brown, the selector on the day, to have another game. New boots were required and Adidas flankers were duly bought. Unfortunately, the second game only lasted 15 minutes before my knee went again. Lying in a heap in the mud, feeling pretty sorry for myself, I was pleased when team captain on the day, Jimmy Handyside, approached, hopefully to give me some moral support. "Gordon, that's you finished," or words to that effect. "I'll buy your boots and I'll give you £5 a month." Needless to say, I never saw any money, so if you happen to see this, Jimmy, you're due me £35. Although there can be no substitute for pulling on the butcher's apron, there are many other jobs to be done. I did most of them, culminating in club president. Duncan McMillan was extremely helpful and a good support to me in this role. Probably the hardest but most rewarding job was that of team secretary. On a Friday night, you might only have 7 or 8 players in the lowest team. Cancellation of fixture was not an option, so bodies had to be found. In pre-mobile phone days, this involved a trawl of the local pubs, usually with some success, ensuring that the fixture went ahead. Perhaps my most memorable moments involved organising and managing the club's first official foreign tours. 23 players travelled in 2 rusty transit minibuses to Leuven in Belgium to take part in our Highland Games. Not to be put off by this experience, we went to Maastricht some years later to complete an international tournament, this time travelling in a more civilised fashion by plane. Both trips were not without incident, but were nevertheless very enjoyable. Of course, another highlight was travelling as club president to play at the Knoll against Neath. Their hospitality was second to none, and indeed some of their players, including ex-Welsh internationalists, joined us for the social activities over the weekend. Indeed, one of them borrowed my kilt. After many years of the front line, I decided to join the merry band of supporters on the hill. It therefore came as a complete surprise to be honoured with life membership at last year's Zoom AGM. Undoubtedly the proudest moment for both myself and family. Our club has always been extremely fortunate to have hard-working, forward-thinking committees, building the best clubhouse in Scottish rugby at that time, and of course sourcing and erecting what are generally considered to be the best club floodlights in Scotland, to name only but 2. The current administration are certainly following in this tradition, making our club one of the most respected in Scotland. Being a member of the club has for me been like being part of an extended family where no one is excluded and friendships have been made and endured for over 50 years. I would hope that our club would remain true to its long-held ethos of providing rugby in the community for all ages, abilities and genders in a competitive, safe and friendly environment. Adhering to these principles will, I am sure, deliver the success we have on the pitch into our next century.
Hi, congratulations Musselburgh Rugby Football Club on reaching your centenary. I am John Talac, past president and life member. I became associated with Musselburgh Rugby Football Club around 1985-6 due to my son Grant being unable to tie his bootlaces when coming to the club for mini rugby on a Sunday. Watching him train, I was asked to help and duly did so, becoming convener following on from some prestigious coaches. I really enjoyed the youth part of the club, eventually helped take both mini and midi teams to Wales,
Champigny in Paris and Denmark on tour. We also took the Colts on tour to France. The first 15 and followers also visited Toronto and Canada twice. The fun we all had fundraising during this time was immense, with all members and lots of friends getting involved. I moved on from coaching the youth and became the bar treasurer for several years, until I was approached by Russel Anderson to become his vice president, eventually taking over the helm as president. During this time, I found a true sense of friendship and helpfulness within the club. Many people do not want to become part of the official part of the club, but asking for help never seemed to be a problem, with few refusals. I learnt the meaning of commitment because you need a lot of it. I also found the rugby fraternity was far spread, especially regarding our club. I remember being in Rome at the Students' World Cup when I was approached by an English supporter asking if I knew, no, not David Campbell, but Ramsay Smith and Alec Stewart. By the way, Scotland beat England to take third place in the tournament. I was also asked the same things in Madeira when on holiday. I was very honoured to be unexpectedly made a life member of the club. Musselburgh is and always will be part of me, and I am extremely proud to say that my son and now my grandsons wear the hoops. Our club badge appears to be known worldwide, and for the right reasons. That is why I am immensely proud to be a member of our club. It is second to none in my book. Long may this continue. The current management are doing an extremely difficult job in exceedingly difficult times. They are very competent and I am sure will take the club forward with their initiatives and strengths. Thank you. See you at the scoreboard. Come away the borough.
So here we are at Gullin, a lovely sunny day in February, and I'm very pleased to be joined by our life member, past president and general all-round good guy, Duncan McMillan.
Thank you.
Duncan, when did you join Musselburgh?
I actually gave you details about that. Was it 56?
You've put here 5960.
5960.
Right, so
that would be right, yeah. That would be right.
Yeah.
Because I started work in 57.
Okay. So in 1959-60, how many teams did Musselburgh have at the time? Can you remember?
4 at the time, and we actually grew to 5.
Ah, marvellous. And what about you? Where did you play in the early days?
Fourths.
The fourths, did you enjoy that?
Thoroughly.
Thoroughly. Was there any good players around in the fourths at that time? Can you remember?
There were a few actually. Jim Drummond, for example.
Oh, right.
Jimmy Robery.
Yeah.
Can't remember others, but
well,
I wasn't one of the good ones.
Well, you did move up to the second 15, I think, did you not?
Yes, I did, but not that year.
All right. So, how long did it take you to develop your propping skills?
Well, in 65 I went to the Foreign Office, and I went to the Foreign Office as a wing forward and came back as a prop.
All right. Was it good teas or dinners?
Aye, just uncontrolled diet.
Right. Of course, even at that time you weren't a heavyweight, were you?
That was the trouble. I was only about 11.5 stone, and I did actually get a game in the first 15 against West of Scotland, and Sandy Carmichael was playing in the front row, but not against me. He was the other side of the scrum. And Sandy the following week was playing for Scotland, and he was the first man to have 50 caps.
Yeah.
So the West of Scotland pack were giants, absolute giants, and it was really dangerous for me to play first front row. Really dangerous. So I decided then that I was not going to play first 15 rugby. But I did eventually play the odd game
but much to the disgust of Ramsay Smith, I refused to play after that.
Alright.
I had about 6 games.
Well, you mentioned Ramsay there. He was certainly somebody who was important at the club.
Very, very important. I mean, you had to know Ramsay to know the nature of the guy. He was a very good player as a scrum half, but he was a great administrator, and everything that was happening in the club happened through Ramsay. Now I happened to work in the same office as Ramsay, and he and I spent a lot of time talking about the club and various things.
Yeah. So of course we put the floodlights up, and then we built the clubhouse.
All driven by Ramsay.
All driven by Ramsay. And what was your job in the when the clubhouse got built then?
I became the well, when the clubhouse was getting built, and we were all involved in it, I volunteered to get onto some committee and some just to do a bit. But I became the first bar convener and effectively chairman of the clubhouse, and that was a hard job, a very hard job, because I knew nothing about the booze business and running a club and running a bar and all that. I had to learn it all. I had to go to the police and speak with them, and I sought advice all over the place.
Oh well, a very important role, and the bar plays a big part in the
well,
club.
I knew it was going to,
yeah,
and I knew it had to make a profit.
Yeah.
And it was kind of hard to get a profit in these days. But our biggest day was our sevens day, and we made £1,000 that day.
Right. Of course, we had the wee hall as well. Were functions part of the
functions? Every week we tried to have a function.
Yeah.
I thought they overdid it, and they did overdo it actually, because you know, when the players were training twice a week and playing on a Saturday, to expect them to turn up to support a wee dance or some damn thing, I thought that was too much, and it was. But anyway, we struggled through as best we could.
Oh, that's good. So moving on then, were you involved in the mini rugby at the time?
Yes.
Set up? Yep.
When the mini rugby started, it was a national thing. Scotland was driving this. And on the first day of mini rugby training, we had 100 boys there.
Fantastic.
It really was fantastic, and they all got a game. And Ewan, who was that age at the time, wanted to play football, and I'd gone with him the previous week to see him play for the boys' brigade. And at half time they were winning 6-0, and him and his pal were reserves. And the guy that was running the team didn't put them on because they wanted to make sure of winning. And I said to you, and I says, this is the last time you'll come to this. The following week he was at mini rugby, and he was quite a star at mini rugby.
Very good, very good. Oh yeah, your boys certainly both did their part in the club, aren't they?
Well, his first love was football. He went to football later on. He actually dislocated his shoulder and couldn't tackle. Yeah. So he went to play football, but he was a very good football player, very, very good.
So when did you retire then from playing? I remember.
When did I retire?
Yeah.
Well, I retired when they stopped sending me letters to attend training.
Oh.
That might have been when you were captain, I'm not sure.
I don't think it was. It was long before my time. I suppose you did play in the force with some of the young boys back then.
Well, you know, as you know, I went on to do court rugby.
Yes.
And after I'd done the court rugby, I went back to play, and I went back at third 15 level, I think.
Right.
And played a few seasons, and then I went to refereeing.
Was it not you and Charlie Clinch in the front row or something?
Yep.
Like that? Yep. That was an education for the younger people as to how to approach the opponents. Yeah. So you mentioned the Colts there. You were one of the instrumental people in the Colts.
I was the only instrumental person. I suggested court rugby. Well, what had happened was I was refereeing, and to begin with I was doing our fourths. And I did a couple of games, but there's one particular game against Preston Lodge, supposedly fourths. We had a couple of 35-year-olds in the team, and these guys tended to stand and fight rather than run.
Yeah.
And not being a very good referee, I didn't actually see what was going on, but I was finding bodies all over the pitch with pretty serious wounds.
Oh dear.
And I decided that if that's what's going to be happening now, we're not going to get any lads out of school. They're just not going to come. So I proposed, I had played against Selkirk Youth Club in the 4th 15, and they were brilliant. They were under 19 at the time. Really good team, well drilled, very fit, and a hard team to beat. And they used to get a crowd of about 200 to watch them. And it was then I discovered that the whole of the Borders had a Colts team. So I proposed that we emulate Selkirk Youth Club. Of all people, Ramsay Smith was against it, because Selkirk wasn't a great club. I mean, Ramsay didn't count it as a great club unless they were playing Scotland. So it was thrown out. So I went off refereeing, and the following year I was advised that they were going to have a Colts team and had some players. So I turned up to coach this, I was told this Colts team. I turned up to coach them, and had Donald McDonald, Derek Watson, and 2 others. That was the team. So fortunately, we tried to get games. We couldn't get games in Edinburgh because there were no Colts in Edinburgh. There were teams that said they were Colts, but they were like Preston Lodge, a couple of 35-year-olds in it. And so we actually managed to get the Borders to give us games, and the whole Border division gave us games, so we managed to get started with them. But it started as 7s, which was fortunate because we had to really scratch about to get 7.
Yeah.
But by the time we'd played 3 or 4 weeks of 7s, we had managed to scrape up to, well, the first game we had with 14 guys.
Yeah. And I think Neil Smith was walking past, and
it wasn't Neil, no.
Was it not? Was it?
No, I can't remember who it was, but
one of the guys was just walking by.
Aye.
Go and get your boots.
Well, it wasn't like that. You see, I said to him, he was looking really keen, and I said to him, "You play rugby, son?" "No, I've never played it." I said, "Would you like a game?" "Yeah, I'd like a game." So I get them up to the changing rooms, and I managed to get kit for them, for everything, except boots. And I got my pair of white plimsolls. But where was I to play them? I couldn't play them front or second row. I couldn't trust them in the backs, so I played them at wing forward. Blindside wing forward. But he ran about the park like a greyhound. But any time we wanted to change direction, he skidded for it.
So we've got the Colts up and running, everything, and we're reaching the early 80s, I think, and the club's had a good period, but we're maybe just a wee bit stagnant, and you come on the scene as president.
Well, I wasn't even on committee. We were in Division 2, and we got dropped to Division 3. And the club was at an all-time low, seriously all-time low. And Chris Barclay-Smith had been out as president and came back in, but he'd had enough. So I was approached and asked to be president, but I wasn't sure about it because, as I say, I wasn't even on committee. I wasn't involved in that, the administration of the club. So eventually I decided I would have a go at it. And that's when I spoke with Donald and Derek, Donald and Raymond, about becoming captain. I wanted to establish captains rather than me coming in as a rookie. And as I say, they did it. And Raymond became captain and Donald became vice captain. And that pulled the team together. 2 guys with reasonable authority at captain level, and and we did well that season. In fact, we were third in the league that season, which suited me because that was a team that didn't go up. So we had gone from losing all our important games to winning the vast majority of our important games, and that was a psychological lift. So when we went forward the following year, they went forward as a winning team, and the following year they were third again. You know, after they'd been first, so they became first, got promoted to Division 2, and they went forward in Division 2 and they were third in the league again, which again suited me because here we were really up there. And the season after that, they became second in Division 2, and that got them promoted to Division 1.
And what do you think of the club now?
I think it's fabulous.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely outstanding.
That's great.
I don't quite know how it's got where it is, but it's done very, very well. Yeah. And of course the team's playing well. Finances are good. I've got good guys running the club. Well, you're cheering it. We've got good people running the club, and the amazing thing to me is we've got 2 women on the board.
Yeah.
I never imagined having women on the board because I never thought it was going to be of interest to them, but they're doing a good job.
Well, there you go, Duncan. It's the 21st century.
Aye, well, I mean, if I didn't actually see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it.
Well,
they're doing a great job, they really are. But I mean, I know Jill, who's treasurer. When I coached the ladies team, I made her captain. She was very good then. Good player, very interested, knew the game, and sadly the team they could never get a full team out on a Saturday.
no.
Even when, on one occasion, I got her to phone them an hour before they were due to turn up to play, to remind them and get a commitment from them. There were still 3 players short. So I gave up on women.
We're very fortunate with Jill and Janet and everybody else on the board at the moment.
Oh, the board's excellent. Excellent.
And the whole club. It's we're about to build this gymnasium, which you feel as though it's quite important. I know, and
well, I find it amazing because, you know, when I started, a gymnasium was away in the distance. Nobody went to a gym. But now we need a gymnasium to get our team fit for a Saturday.
Well, if this snow ever goes away, we'll get it built.
Oh, I'm sure.
Sure it will. Well, thank you very much, Duncan.
You're very welcome. Thanks for coming down.
And we hope to see you at Stony Hill when we can reopen.
Oh, I won't be there.